Grandmama used to pray, oh Lord, please save them from the evil snares and all the dangers that entangle. Yea, though they walking through the valley of the shadows, just prepare and make them fit for every battle, because I know they bound to come, and I know they bound to fall, but in your bounty, Lord, preserve their beautiful. Right, we still surviving off of grandma's prayers, surrounded by the jungle and the lion's den. Tread light, cause these traps is inconspicuous. They hide right in plain sight, thinking we don't see them when they linger. Look right beneath the surface, then leave a trail of corpses. Crisis, prices, your life a disposable commodity, like living in a fantasy, conditioned to believe that the system even cares whether selling CDs or walking or driving or reading. Look, they don't even need a reason. It's just you breathing and being black. When it's such a pretty fall, it don't seem like we falling at all, at all. It's just a GMO dream, where things are never really what they seem. Please cue the violins, tell them just to play me something pretty, cause this gritty city got me screaming bloody murder. Said it got me screaming. This gritty city got me on some. Look, get your hand up on my pocket. Distraction, so lazy they use the same tactics, like condom with some trinkets. Just don't let them get to thinking. That light bulb gets a blinking. You know niggas and ideas. Oh dear, my dear, you may not know me, but I know you very well. Foresight, they say hindsight is 20/20. Well, tell me something, we gotta see that history is on repeat, and maybe it takes a beat and a melody to speak a little louder than the message in the clouds or the essence in the air. I swear, my God is just so clear that a system driven by fear can never give us nothing but more of the same things. Oh, when it's such a pretty fall, it don't seem like we falling at all. It's just a GMO dream, where things are never really what they seem. Please cue the violins, tell them just to play me something pretty, cause this gritty city got me screaming. It's murder. Got me screaming, got me. This gritty city got me on some.
Give it to a grand jury, let a room full of crackers try to justify murder. Black leaders try to tell me that the reason I'm a victim is my clothes too baggy, my pants keep sagging. How the fuck you niggas leaders when you niggas all scared? Church suits, perfume, slick hair, worse too fake to compare. No nuts, no spine, I swear when the city on fire, ain't none of y'all there. Smart niggas on an idiot box trying to argue with the cop like the pig really care. See it in me, certainly not, nigga. We are men, fucking run up on the cop with a fully automatic rat-a-tat-tat-a-tat. Open up the paddy wagon, say Freddie Grace, and I'm home to his mama till I have a nice day. When you fear for your life, it ain't a right or wrong way. Nigga, shit, this what the police say. When they kill a kid around my way, 16 round spray on a cold brown lay, 17 years young, somebody black son. Dumb. They're afraid of the dog, they murdering his son. Then they come with the cover up, they don't even cover up the young boy body while his warm blood run like an animal or something. We can see a soul even looking back at the slum, but there's a lot of good cops. Show me. Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Where are the good ones at? Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. Show me. Show me. But you can't show me. When a bad cop stop and he pull his firearm and 16 shots in the body of Laquan, where the good cops at? Wouldn't they stop that, pull a bad cop back and arrest that cracker? They ain't doing none of that. Where the evidence at? Delete tape from the Burger King, cover up the murder scene. 8 or 9 cops, not a good one with him. Drugs and guns being planted on a victim, and if he don't die, then they ship him off to prison. It's a whole fucking system, not a lone road cop. You be running to defend him till your child gets shot. These bars real cold, even though my shit hot. Just looking when a cop gets shot. All of a sudden, he's a motherfucking top cop. Last week, he was beating up a lady on an interstate in Cali, and he knew that she was homeless. While the good cops watched and condoned it. Try to tell me that it's one cop only. Look, devil, I was raised in the ghetto where the pigs plant metal, so a nigga know better. Now you ask since when they've been doing this forever to oppress black men, women, children, or whoever. Got one drop from an African pop or a royal bloodline from his African mom.
Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me. Show me. Show me. Bet you can't show me.
Why is he at least in jail right now? Because you know what? If it was me or any of these people back here that shot and killed somebody, we would be in jail right now.
Deaf poetry is: you not a fucking revolutionary. You just another motherfucker who loves to hear him, her, themselves talk. You know.
What's up, good people? We are live and direct. This is Black Power Media, RSTV. We are in the building. Ha! Good to hear y'all. Good to see y'all. Good to be with y'all here today. Today, I'm Kalonji Changa. For those of you who are not familiar, today I have a couple guests. Might have a few guests, but I want y'all to stick around. That was Wise Intelligent from Poor Righteous Teacher. That joint was called One Good Cop. He said, bet you can't show me one good cop. You can go back and check out that. Wise Intelligence always delivering the way he's supposed to. I got a couple guests here today. And we're going to be talking about imperialism. And we're revisiting a discussion that Dhoruba and I have been having with everybody from Cornel West and Jill Stein to Claudia De La Cruz. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you tap into that. But I have a couple guests today. We will have Dhoruba will be joining us along with Ajamu Baraka. And this just in, we'll have another special guest probably around a quarter after. So make sure y'all stay tuned. I know some of y'all are like, we can't see you. Bam, here it is. What's happening, good people? I want to start this show off today. Today's a very important show for us on so many levels. For one, today is the 35th birthday of my oldest child. So shout out to my daughter. My daughter Quita turned 35 years old today. She is a wonderful, powerful being, and I'm very grateful to have her in our world on this planet. Quita, keep on being the greatest you that you can be, and we're looking forward to witnessing more of your greatness. Definitely. Also, I want to say this is the 20-year anniversary of the FTP movement. Our 20-year anniversary was this past Sunday, June 9th. And for those of you who missed the show we did a couple days ago, I was at Coleman with a number of different serious freedom fighting attorneys. And we were down there on behalf of our main man, Leonard Peltier, who we had the opportunity to build with and talk to. And of course, his parole was held this past Monday. His parole hearing, which was the first that he had in 15 years. Leonard will be 80 years old in September, and he's been locked up close to 5 decades. So we want to definitely say keep your chants and revolutionary prayers and all that good stuff, and keep Leonard on your mind. We had his attorneys come on to talk about what is taking place and what to expect. So if you missed that, make sure you go to the channel and check out what it is we're having. Also, make sure you subscribe to this platform. We are close to 50,000 subscribers, and I think we're about 800 away. So you can subscribe right at the bottom of the screen. You see it scrolling, you can get an idea of where we at and stay on point and all that good stuff, so you'll know where to find that critical political action. Without further ado, I want to bring on our guests. We're going to start with Ajamu Baraka. Ajamu, what's happening, man? How you feeling?
I'm doing well, doing well. Thank you for bringing me back.
No doubt, no doubt. I mean, you're resident up in this piece. You know what I mean? So we just bring you through. You know what I mean? Whenever you're not, out there banging, which you always banging, so that's necessary. We also have Dhoruba. He's on deck. We're waiting for him to turn his camera back on. Um, and I think he has it on because that's what we do around here. What's happening, D? How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. Greetings to both of you. Hope everybody's okay.
Okay. We're live on arrival, and I know you seem kind of calm today, D. What's happening, man? Is it did the revolution, are we victorious or what's going on, man?
No,
Did
you
we
know,
miss up?
I gotta be cool when I'm around a Ajamu, man. I gotta be
Oh,
cool, man.
is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, cause man, he gets me all worked up, man.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I can see
man.
that happening, man. The bat folks do, man. They'll get you charged and whatnot, man. So, we trying to figure out what's happening around here. So I got to put on my cool shades. Pajama,
Yeah,
was
I'm telling
that's
you,
what,
man. They have you running through a door. Say, man, why didn't you open the door, man? All you had to do was open it.
No. Brother Drew was my leader for a long time. So it's always an honor to spend some time listening to his wisdom. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't dismiss it. You can't devalue when someone's been in the trenches for as long as this brother, and not just in the trenches, but able to pull valuable information and analysis from struggle. Because some people could be involved in this thing for a long time, but you talk to them, it's almost like talking to a much younger person. But
Right.
our dear brother here always has insightful information and a critical analysis is always able to propel us to the next level.
I like that, Ajamu. That sounded really well rehearsed. I don't know if.
Well, the brother inspires me. See,
Okay, all right. I
All
was gonna say
crazy.
clearly. I was gonna say clearly. The Ruba has your cash out. Um. Anyway, no, we definitely appreciate both of you all coming on and joining us. I was about to say on this Monday, so this show you how far behind I am. It's like Thursday or something, but definitely you two brothers are no strangers to the platform. It's a lot going on in regards to imperialism. That's been the flavor of our lives. You know what I mean? This has been going on for you know as long as we can recall. Of course, Ajamu, you've been keeping up with the whole Ruba's call for the building of a united front against fascism, which, of course, would be right on time. I wanted to know, starting with you, Ajamu, I would say the state of imperialism and colonialism and why would a united front against fascism be necessary in 2024?
that's a good question because one of the impetus that our dear brother shared with us was a reminder of the gathering that took place. I think it was 1969 or
Yeah,
69.
69,
Um,
yeah.
an effort to bring together forces to, in fact, uh, build a movement that will confront the kind of fascistic uh, behavior and relationships that were consolidating during that decade. Now, the system had some things up its sleeve that allowed it to be able to withstand our efforts to try to snuff it out. And in fact, we saw that in the 1970s when they were able to really consolidate themselves and to engage in what became a more than 50-year counter-revolutionary process. And the forms of fascism as a consequence also took different shapes. Our brother George Jackson talked about one of the things about fascism in the US is that it may be almost a perfected form in the sense that it can become invisible, at least for those forces who are not being directly impacted by the repressive apparatus of the state. Now, today, however, the system has very few cards up its sleeve. The crisis that it is facing, the crisis that it perceives to be an existential threat. That is the fact that we are experiencing the real beginning of the end of white world superiority, white world supremacy, because this system was unable to pull another rabbit out of the hat. It is now relying even more today than in the past on naked force and violence, and that poses certain kinds of challenges for us. One is, and this is why this call is important. One is for us to really begin to try to understand the particular configurations of power today in order for us to be clear about what must be done. And so I argue that this is a timely call. But unlike what may have unfolded in 1969, because of the relative weakness of our forces in this country, the first phase of this has to be a phase in which we struggle among ourselves to, in fact, get a clear understanding of what it is we're up against. What are the internal realities within our society, our communities? What are the particular kinds of class relationships? What are the particular kind of class forces that make up the fascistic forces today? How has fascism changed or not changed? So these are some of the questions that we're going to have to struggle with among ourselves as we move toward the possibility of some kind of united front. Because even the question of a united front has to be struggled through, because we've had various forces, various attempts at united fronts, not just against fascism, but other kinds of united fronts. And so even that question in terms of how broad is a united front? What other class configurations? What have been some of the lessons that we need to reacquaint ourselves with these various attempts at united fronts before? So we got a process here as we move toward trying to see if we can in fact realize the call that our brother made to us as a movement.
Definitely appreciate that, Ajamu, for laying it out the way you did. And to your point, I would one of the things you mentioned, and I'm gonna paraphrase, is basically what fascism looks like now, opposed to how it's presented itself in the past. And I think that that's one of the things that in the numerous discussions that we've had with Dhoruba, is I think oftentimes folks are still using um, archaic uh, lenses when looking at what fascism is, and they don't really understand how fascism, capitalism, imperialism, colonialism is able to morph and manifest itself in a way that's hip, chic, and modern. So I want to ask you, Dhoruba, fascism now compared to, let's say, let's take it to back when, the Black Panther Party was in the heyday. Let's go, 66 and beyond. What does fascism look like now in comparison, or is it the same old shit? Number one, and also to Jamu's point around struggling for a united front, because when we're talking about a united front, I think that to some of the critics and some of the folks who are just onlookers, I think that they take that phrase or those words lightly, as if it's just saying, okay, boom, we're gonna all get together and sing and dance, hold hands, and wait for electoral politicians to guide us in the right direction. give us a give us some feedback on what fascism looks like now compared to then, and also the struggles of building a united front.
Well, this just that's a lot. That's a lot. But Ajamu pointed out. I'm going to take off on one of the last things that he said. He was talking about even in forming a united front, we have to struggle amongst ourselves and with fraternal groups and movements and organizations around the role that each can play in a united front, in having a mass line, a mass uh, um, um, position that working people, students, and people from all walks of life that are suffering under the capitalist uh, exploitation and finance capitalism's uh, deprivation of their human rights and their right to housing and all of these things. It's an educational process. I think you and I discussed that, Kalanji, that that form calling for a united front and trying to build one, a thoroughgoing front, a political principled front. It requires political education on everybody's part. It's like on the job political education, and a lot, like you said, a lot of people don't know what fascism is, or what how it manifests itself. And I like to say that um, when we look at the fascism that arose in the middle of the 20th century and in the early part of the 20th century in 1929 and 1930s in Italy and in Germany, um, uh, we see the the origins of how um, authoritarian political system, authoritarian political rule, and jingoistic nationalism, coupled with white supremacy, coupled with racial, um, racist, and and anti working class uh, sentiments and ideology, and backed by religious dogma, can bring about the slaughter of millions of people, can bring about the destruction of nation states, and so fascism in its early form um, uh, couldn't have really manifested itself in its full blown nature without a war. And World War II was the cockpit of that. And and the end of the World War II in 1945 um, marked the beginning of what you and I and Ajamu are probably more familiar with is the false dichotomy, the false dichotomy of the Cold War. And World War II, I just want to point this out. World War II witnessed the devastation of Europe and its economies, and and all of these economies, most of these economies were the economies of former imperialist nations, former colonial nations. Um, France was a basket case after World War II. It was occupied by the Germans, and it was a basket case. Its infrastructure, its economy was shattered. Same thing with Belgium. The same thing with the UK. The same thing with the Netherlands and all of the European countries were devastated by by World War II. The Soviet Union lost over 25 million people and was the major catalyst, the major force, and actually won World War II was the former Soviet Union, which we know today is Russia. But what I want to point out is at the end of the World War II, the United States was the preeminent military and economic power on the planet, because war was not waged in the United States. The United States had a vibrant economy that had sped up in order to build a war machine. The military-industrial complex Eisenhower talked about 10 years after the end of World War II had just begun to find its legs, just begun to gain strength, and so the United States, in order to revive these former colonial nations that were devastated by World War II, the United States instituted what was called the Marshall Plan. It was a massive economic and fiscal revival of the European economy. The U.S. poured billions of dollars into Europe in order to rebuild these colonies. And it did the same thing with Japan, but it did it with Japan in a wholly different way. That's a whole nother story. But I want to point out that at that time that the U.S. began the Marshall Plan, and that Europe had laid devastated in the wake of World War II, the Soviet Union had control of almost all of Eastern Europe as a result of the war. And they formed what was called the Soviet bloc nations, an alliance of communist, so-called communist nations who had allegiance and were part of the geopolitical construct of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had, I believe, Ajamu could correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Soviet Union had 15 Soviets, 15 Central African states in its, Uzbekistan and all of these stands were all part of the Soviet Union. And so the Cold War, pitted the communist East and against the capitalist West. And it was a war that was fought in proxy. It was fought in Africa. It was fought in Latin America. It was fought in Asia. The Soviet Union's military and the U.S. military never or seldom clashed directly with each other. It was a proxy war. It was fought in the former colonies of Europe. France tried to reclaim its influence in Africa and in Southeast Asia, and they were opposed by first the Soviet Union and then China after 1949. So I'm saying all of this to say that that the world that was created in the wake of World War II created a whole different type of imperialism. It created the basis for a whole new type of imperialism that would come to blossom in the early 1980s and beginning in the 1980s, going in the 1990s, where technology began to really up the ante in terms of military weaponry, in terms of the standards of living of working class people, and in terms, most of all, how finance capital began to operate in that after World War II. That was the basis of globalization. The U.S. Marshall Plan was the basis for the recovery of Europe and the economic establishment of the European Union that we know today. NATO was an alliance that was formed, I believe, in 1947, maybe, or going into 40, I think it's 47. NATO was formed, and the U.S. tried to form other alliances in Southeast Asia and in other parts of the world in order to establish its military control and its hegemonic control of territory. Of course, Israel, the European settler state of Israel, was established in 1948, and it grew out of the collapse of Ottoman Empire and European and the ascendancy of European imperialism. But I've said all of this to say that when the Black Panther Party came along in 1969 and saw that the war that the U.S. was waging in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam and Cambodia, was a continuation of the French attempt to recolonize of Southeast Asia, and they were defeated. They were defeated by socialist and communist forces supported by the Soviet Union and China, and France had to exit Vietnam. The U.S. took up the struggle to keep the communist North from completing the unification of Vietnam, and thereby threatening the U.S. hegemony in Southeast Asia and Western hegemony in Southeast Asia, and this was after Korea. So fascism evolved during the Cold War, and democracy, so-called democracies, became essentially fascist nation states, but they had the patina and the dressing of being a democratic. If we look at Germany and its rise to reindustrialization, the same companies that Hitler used to produce his armaments and his war machine were the same companies that would become the basis for the German economic boom and miracle. We're talking about Mercedes-Benz, Crump, all of these major German companies and industrialists. They didn't go away, but they had this so-called patina, this camouflage of democracy, where the people, after denazification, that the people could vote and put into office, their leaders, though the leaders of the state. This was democratic fascism because the authoritarian and corporate military control of the state was still intact. It was the camouflage of democracy that people related to, the camouflage of political democracy. And the United States, of course, is really unique in that respect, because the United States has a built-in mechanism in its electoral system that permits it to override the popular vote and maintain the relationships of wealth and property and ownership in case the multitudes of American people decide that they want people, the rich, to pay more taxes, or they want to enforce restraints on corporations and conglomerates. So the idea that people could elect to Congress their representatives is a misnomer, is a delusion, really, because it's finance capital that controls the electoral system. And at the basis of this, to make sure that the popular vote doesn't overturn this, there's the electoral college system. And that's
one second. So D, before you go further, we have our other guest has arrived as well, so I want to bring him on to the stage. You got Professor James Small joining us today. What's going on, Dr. Small? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm still out in the schoolyard. The bus never showed up, but thank God I can reach you thanks to this imperialist technology. We can use it to our advantage. Dhoruba, how are you doing, brother? I've been trying to reach you. I've been reaching out.
Yeah, man. But our crew, they're making headways there at the castle. But we talk about that later. They're making, we getting that cracker out of the castle in this restaurant, and we communicating with UNESCO now. So them these young expats, they moving. But but I people, the guests don't know what we're talking about, so we'll talk about that later.
Okay. I love where you took things. It was just that's one of the best analysis and historical explanation that was simple. I mean, easy to understand.
Right on.
But
So
I just want to through with that because I want to address the specific question of what's the difference between the fascism now and the fascism of yesterday. You know, the African people, and I want to say this from Jump Street, because if somebody asked me, well, if you had a united front, what was the, we were gonna have black folks following white folks. I said, you know, I'm not calling for no front in the United States, you know, that on behalf of our people that's going to have us in a subordinate non-leadership position. I don't even know how that even came up. But anyway, what I wanted to say was in 1969, when the Panther Party called for a united front, we were talking to a left that was galvanized, that was active. The anti-war movement was a massive mass movement across the United States. It captured thousands and thousands of students every year. The colonial enclaves that we call ghettos would explode and resist and rebel. Workers unions were going out and demanding more equity and better wages, and tenants were taking over from landlords and getting rent control in urban areas like New York and Boston. There was a vibrant movement in America that, if it could be put together in a united front, could have a significant amount of impact on the oppression of people, not only on a daily basis, but in terms of their relationship to power and their relationship to the state. So the Black Panther Party called for this convention. And I just want to point out that 7,000, 8,000 people showed up. I think I sent you a list of all the organizations that were there, even the SCLC and the Communist Party were there. But conspicuously absent, and I keep pointing this out, was the so-called cultural nationalists, were the messianic Black organizations in the community. They were conspicuously absent, and the anti-poverty pimps from the LBJ's War on Poverty, and the money that flowed into the Black community to encourage Black capitalism, they weren't there neither, you see. And the pork chop preachers who were making money off of Black folks' misery, they weren't there neither. But 8,000 people showed up, and they were mostly, and 70 to almost 70% were white radical leftists.
Right. So check it.
But the reason why I'm pointing that out, because just the similarity in that makeup there to right now in terms of the pro-Palestinian struggles on the campuses, how it's ironic. And we got to point these things out. How there's thousands of students that were arrested right at in the pro-Palestinian rallies that swept the country and indeed swept the world, right? And they were opposed to the genocide of the white supremacist apartheid state of Israel on the Palestinian people, okay? And the government tried to, first of all, change the debate and flip it into something like it was anti-Semitism. And then when that didn't work, when the students realized that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, you see, then they really started panicking, and they brought out the goons. And they started beating these kids up and arresting them and trying to accuse them of being violent. Now, this is the same scenario that existed in 1969, because it was right after in May of that year that in the People's Park in LA, the police killed a brother in the anti-war demonstrations. And one of the demonstrations that was coming up was a demonstration against Israel and its treatment of the Palestinians. This was in 1969. in the People's Park. And I believe it was USC, or I believe it's USC or UCLA, one of those two owned the People's Park, owned that property. And they wanted to create a dorm for married college students and undergraduates, right? That's what they wanted to do because it was a site for anti-war demonstrations, anti-police demonstrations. It was a major site. And so the people rebelled against this in the People's Park, and the police came in and beat people and killed a young brother, a bystander, right? And this was like 4 weeks before we called for the United Front. Okay, so people showed up, but the forces in the Black community that it should have showed up didn't show up, and
Okay, so
these were the ones that ultimately would talk about Black faces in high places. These were the ones that were talking about, you know, the Black Congressional Caucus, the poverty pimps that we've become that. These were the Black capitalists that would later on talk about, you know, keeping the Black dollar in the Black community. These were the same forces that was talking about, you know, the mothership connection and all of these forces. They would later support the war on drugs and the war on crime that put all millions of Black people in prison and in the criminal justice system. I just want to show you the people that didn't show up were later the people that supported the comprador class that is evolved that we have today. So calling for a united front today, I'm anxious to find out how the Black Pan-Africans are going to show up, how the Black nationalists and the Black Marxists and Leninists are going to show up on principle and unity and building a united front.
Well, we're going to definitely get back to you on that. But while we talking about the mothership connection, I know Ajamu going to have to leave soon, so you know what I'm saying, I don't want him to miss his mothership. But what I want to say, I wanted to ask Ajamu, to Dhoruba's points, some of the things that he talked about. You know, he talked about cultural nationalists. He talked about, you know, folks thinking that I suppose that white folks would be leading a united front. I want and he spoke briefly on what's going on with Palestine. I wanted to know from you your thoughts on how a united front would impact the question of Palestine right now. This whole Israeli genocide, massacre, and just outright treachery. I want to know, who do you feel? I mean, how do you feel about a united front when it comes to that particular piece, and who should lead a united front? Because right now we're talking about, you know, right now, you know, it's not too many people that call themselves African in the so-called nationalist movement. A lot of folks love being Black, they love being this, they love being that. But when you talk about African-led, folks want to talk about getting along. They want to quote different Europeans, and I wanted to know your thoughts on this because of the fact that I know that, you know, you have your own position, and you know, just kind of get a feel of what your vantage point, your view.
And I think that let me first start by suggesting that some of those same forces that Brother Dhoruba identified that didn't show up in 1969, they're not going to show up today, and they're not going to show up today because what Brother Dhoruba laid out was an analysis of fascism that is rooted in capitalist political economy. And this is the element that people seem to sometimes forget, that when we talk about fascism, we're talking about a particular kind of rule of capital, okay? And so when you start off with the framework of understanding that we're talking about a capitalist system, a capitalist state, and the various forms in which that capitalist rule can take, then we begin to define the range of those forces that might make up a united front. That is, if you don't understand that the root of the issue is the colonial capitalist system, that is the frame, that is the generator of a fascistic uh, societal organization, then you don't really need to be part of something that's being called a united front. So the united front, in my estimation, is going to be and should be much more narrow in terms of the historical task of the day. There's another element too that we want to make sure that people think about as we struggle through this understanding of where we are today at this moment, and that is the different forms in which this fascism thing has taken. That is important to understand the European history and how that shaped things, because of course we're dealing with the reality of the white world supremacy that's disintegrating. Okay, uh, but what we need to also keep in mind, bring into the equation, is the particular kinds of experiences that African people and other colonized people have had. That when we talk about fascistic structures of societies in which there is systematic dehumanization, violence, that the notion of human rights for the dominated don't even exist, where there is the absolute rule of colonial capital, then we have to bring into the equation the colonial question. And when we bring in that colonial question, then we have to look at the particular kinds of experiences that we've had in the colonized world, in particular in Africa, but also in those settler states, like in the United States of America, where we had,
Mhm.
in essence, a colonial system, a a a a a, uh, a colonial system, and a system of fascism. Is
That's
quite.
right.
I think we can make the argument that at the end of the so-called Civil War and the so-called Reconstruction, that when Reconstruction was overthrown, what was instituted in the southern states of the United States and really throughout the country, but primarily in the U.S., in the southern states where the majority, 90% of our people live, was in fact a form of fascism. One party rule, colonial capitalist rule, no democratic rights, no human rights. And in fact, scholarship has verified the fact that when forces in Europe, in particular in Germany, when they're looking around and looking at how they can build a movement, they and because they also were informed and operated from a white supremacist lens and point of view, they looked to the mother of all models of white supremacy, which was the United States of America, and in
The
particular the
United
practices,
Southern States.
the
Right.
social practices in the southern states. And it was those practices. It was the practices that the Germans experimented with in Namibia when they, began the process of colonization in their particular territories with the concentration camps, and these reserve areas were copied directly from what they observed in the U.S. All of the race laws that they saw emerge in the U.S. People had to be reminded that basically you had an apartheid system in the United States of America that became the model of the global white supremacist movement. So those of us who were subjected, our people who were subjected to those conditions, we were living in a fascist environment. That's why we make
That's
the
right.
argument that the African people in the U.S. and African people and other colonized people, we don't need to be taught what fascism is because it's part of our historical experience.
Right.
Now, what happened was, and people like Du Bois and Amy Césaire, even George Patmore talked about it, was that in the inter-war years, the 1930s in particular, in Europe, you had Mussolini, and then even more particular, Hitler and his Nazi movement applying to other Europeans the colonial practices that have been imposed and applied to us for decades. Okay, that's why Hitler became the personification of evil. because the Nazis took the notion of white supremacy to its logical conclusion. They said, yeah, white folks are superior. We represent a superior civilization. And guess what? Us German Aryans, we are the absolute superior of everybody else.
Well, they
So
the tip of the spear.
exactly, they took it all the way to its logical conclusion. So when we talk about fascism, we've got to bring in those elements also, because what we when we if we don't, then we would find ourselves kind of looking at the phenomenon as it's developing even today, in a way that can not provide the kind of mapping that we need to have for what is happening specifically to our people in the U.S. and to other colonized peoples in other parts of the world. So this is very, very important to understand this relationship between the center, or these metropolitan centers of global capital, and the colonial relationships, and their neo-colonial forms, but also the settler colonial frame and the fascistic experiences that we had in the United States, the Aboriginal people in Australia, the indigenous and other people in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things have to be part of a conceptual understanding of fascism. Lastly,
I just want. I'm gonna let. I know you gotta go, Ajamu, but I just want to shoot this in because I know Justice Warren will come in afterwards. I want Ajamu to finish, but one of the things that I want to say is that the whole process of our being here was an act of war. Was an act of war that was waged against African people by Europeans, and the European slave trade was a commercialization of that act of war. So we're here as an act of war, and we're still in a war. Okay. And the reason why I want to point that out is because war is the continuation of politics by violent means, and politics is the continuation of war by non-violent means. So we may have successes and symbolic victories here and symbolic victories there, but until we win the war, we're never going to receive any of those reformist fruits of these reforms that even this united front would fight for and stand for. These are just tactical objectives taken in the form of trying to defend ourselves and survive in this fascistic white supremacist construct. America was a white supremacist settler state. It was a white supremacist construct, and that's delusional. White supremacy is the delusion that was created by Europeans in the 19th century. We can't function based on their delusion. We have to function based on our reality. And our reality is what Ajamu was pointing out. We've always lived under fascism because we were always in a state of war with this capitalist system that evolved from this mercantile transatlantic slave trade and the foundational wealth of the U.S. So I just want Ajamu to finish, but I just want people to understand that we are at war. And so when we talk about a united front, we're talking about a united front that has to deal with every aspect of this war. Okay, whether it's the electoral aspect, whether it's the control of the military in our community, the armed agents of the state, that we know we have to take community control of that whole process. Okay, and so
yes,
so,
and
we, so I just wanted, I'm sorry, Ajamu, I just wanted to point that out. We at war.
Cool.
you're absolutely right, and that has to be said over and over again because the kind of fascism that's reconsolidating itself in the center, that's impacting the broader society. Because again, we all know that we have been subjected to the fascistic relationship between ourselves and the settler colonial state for decades, for a few hundred years. But was unfolding right now and consolidating, in my opinion, is the attempt on the part of the neoliberal capitalist class, that's the hegemonic class, to ensure, from its point of view, its continued hegemony. They are prepared to, in fact, blow up the world in order to maintain white world supremacy. And what they are, and the tool that they're using, this is what we've been pointing out for quite some time, as people have been looking at this Trump phenomenon and concluding that that represents the highest expression of neo-fascism in the U.S. I've been arguing for the last 7 years that that's the delusion, that basically the driving forces of neo-fascism in the U.S. are those class forces that control the state. Who are those class forces? The neoliberal capitalist class. What they're trying to impose and utilize is neoliberalism. Now, it's important to remind ourselves that liberalism itself, there was supposed to be some kind of advanced creation coming out of the European Enlightenment, was a backward ideology. That it just consolidated white supremacist thought. That basically it is in itself a right-wing phenomenon. Okay, it gave justification for the colonial capitalist system. So when we talk about neoliberalism, we're talking about the attempt to try to reinstitute a classical form of liberalism, which is fascistic. Okay, so it is these neoliberal Democrats that are the driving force of fascism. That's not to dismiss those dangerous forces that are part of the Trumpian phenomenon. But, when we talk about a united front against fascism, that's why it's important to define what we're talking about. Because for some people, when you're talking about a united front against fascism, the first thing they think about is Trump. And that, if that becomes a understanding of what we're up against, then basically all we're doing is confusing our people and propping up the Democrats who present themselves as an alternative to so-called fascism, when they in fact are the driving force. So these are some of the questions that we've got to deal with as we talk about this united front. And again, if we keep the focus on the fact that fascism is a form of capitalist rule, then those elements who have no who don't have an issue with capitalism, then they won't end up in our front, and they won't end up confusing the masses of our people as we build at this critical moment in history.
Right on.
Africans,
So
I got to jump, but can I do this, Kalanji? Now, what I got to go into, we got our editorial meeting of Bar. It doesn't last that long. Can I come back and see if I can come back in about 20 minutes or so?
please do.
Yeah, that.
Yes, sir.
I'll look. Yeah, because I really want to take off on that, because when he talks about neoliberalism, I've been talking about the phenomena of democratic fascism, and they're supposed to be opposite to each other. Okay,
Right.
but democratic fascism has been institutionalized in America's electoral process and constitutional foundation. Okay, and
Yes to your question, though. Sorry about that.
But I'm having to jump. I'm gonna come back and I'll join in about 20 minutes or so. Okay.
No doubt. We here.
Okay.
Right on.
All right.
You're checking out Black Power Media. We are joined by Dhoruba Bin Wahad, Ajamu Baraka, and Professor James Small will be hopping back on in a few. Definitely, you can continue on with your point, Dhoruba. I didn't want to just cut you off.
No, I know you had your station. Listen, when Ajamu talks about neoliberalism and how we shouldn't be confused by the "Make America Great Again" buffoons. I mean, anybody who listens to any of these folks rap should understand one simple thing: that you should never underestimate the power of plenty of ignorant people. We should never underestimate the power of masses of ignorant people. Okay, that's the first thing. And the popularism that historically arises around fascism historically has always been a jingoistic a worship of the state, of the so-called founding values and supremacy of the state. That's a unique feature of fascism. is this jingoistic nationalism. And if we notice that they always use, whether they use terms like MAGA or Make America Great Again, or whether they're the great American Project 2025, you know, or whether it's the American century, is just jingoistic messianic um, idea of the nation state. You see, and as representing the spirit of the people, of the folk. And because the United States is a white supremacist construct, a colonial settler state with a colonial settler mentality, the idea or the threat that soon this nation state would be a majority people of color, would be a majority of people that look like you and me, sends tremors and 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 anxiety, extreme anxiety through the ranks of those who have enjoyed white skin privilege and white privilege in this country since its inception. You see, and this is where we need to understand where the United Front, how the United Front deals with the issue of the delusional notion of white supremacy in a European settler state. You know, whenever this state talks about, this nation state talks about Palestine, it talks about Palestine and the Zionist settlers as looking like them. There's thousands of, whether you know it or not, there's thousands of American citizens who are in the IDF right now in Gaza. And they got a bill circulating into the US Congress to give them the same benefits as the GIs get, the GI bills and the insurances that US servicemen get, to give them this bill. Now, if this should tell you something, how integral that settler state in Western Asia is to the very well-being of US global hegemony. That's one of the most crucial bases and outposts of European settler colonial power is right there. And now you have an educational movement that we didn't have, let me put it this way, that mirrors the 1969 in May of 1969, that year, okay? And it's this case of how all of these thousands of students that have understand what their government is complicit in. It's complicit in genocide. They understand how their dollars and their money and their nation is supporting the murder of 15,000 Palestinian children, ethnic cleansing on TikTok in real time. I mean, we could pick it up right now. You see, this ain't like something that's obscure. And this means that this generation now is open to understanding that this capitalist society that breeds this genocidal mentality is the same mentality of the European settler state. That's what this nation was founded at. That southern border that they're talking about, how the southern border and the porous southern border, the so-called porous southern border in the United States, and millions, hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens and criminals and drug dealers and gangbangers and terrorists are streaming across the border into the United States. This is a major issue. Why is this a major issue? Because to the European settler who took this territory from the native people and who took the Texas and California and New Mexico, took all of those states, all of that territory from the Mexicans. They seized it in war and took that territory from the Mexicans. They didn't stop till they got to the Rio Grande. Okay? So when we understand that the panic that this white European settler state is going through is talking about ethno-nationalism, Christian nationalism. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene up in the Capitol You understand? I mean, she's a buffoon. You see, and you have Lauren Bobart, whatever her name is. You understand? And I mean, these are the people that they have in the leadership of the so-called neoliberals, of the so-called progressive electoral party. The more rigid party, the more right wing parties that are now, there is no really left. I mean, the right has dominated the entire spectrum. Neoliberals are basically liberal conservatives. And what is a neoconservative? You see? So we have to understand that the way the state is constructed right now, all of those organizations that are fighting for the rights of homeless people, that are in the community on the grassroots, fighting for the rights of homeless people, they need the political education to understand that it's the capitalist property system that is the reason for this homelessness. And once they understand that, then we could begin to get them to go look into the history of Freddie Gray and the tenants movement in New York, and how they forced the New York landlords who are abandoning slums and buildings in the black community and collecting the insurance, how they forced legislation for rent control housing, because the landlords couldn't just freeze them out, kick them out, and then renovate the place and sell the rent at 500% the amount that they pay. They couldn't do that no more. But people had to fight for that. And gradually from that point on to now, that fight has been eroded. So a lot of the young people today are fighting battles that we've already fought and won. But because they have no radical history, no understanding of their radical history, instead they're relating to the delusional history of white supremacy and the white supremacist nation settler state. Because they don't know that we already won these battles we won the symbolic battle for the vote. How many times do we have to have legislation about voting? How many times we have to go through that? Okay, we've already won certain battles, but they've taken it back piece by piece. And as Ajamu pointed out, they have institutional memory, and we don't. You see, and so what our young people are doing in many cases is reinventing failure. This is why forming a united front it requires political education. That's what the nature of the struggle is going to be with different organizations. Okay, a united front does not preempt the activities of an organization. It's an alliance. They still do what they're supposed to do and what they've been doing, but it should resonate. It should have a broader audience, because there's other members in the United Front who may not be working in housing, okay, but they're working in other areas of government that deals with public lands and allocation of real estate, okay? So they get a better appreciation of the poor people that's sleeping on the street. What does that mean? This is all about political education, because it all comes back to the capitalist system and the system of economic control that was premised on our slavery. But so I just want to point out, and I'm going to end here, the fascism, it's very important to understand that fascism, and in the case of America, requires the subservience of individual rights for the perceived good of the nation. That's how they cloak white supremacy and racism. Okay? And so individual rights they're always talking about, but is there such a thing as one person, one vote in America? No. When you look at how Trump got elected, he lost the majority of vote. He lost the mass vote. He won the electoral college. So now we have to look at the electoral college, when it was set up, why it was set up, and what it's supposed to do. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to trigger that fascist control of the state in the moment when property and U.S. hegemony is threatened, or the hegemony of the ruling elite. That's what the electoral college system is for. That's why each state can send its own delegates to Congress. So who are the ones that can control the delegates in the state? It's those people with property. It's those people that control the militarized police, that control the major industries in the state. So if they're threatening and they feel threatened, right, the electoral college kicks in and gives them the chief executive that they want to protect their interests. It's an automatic fascist trigger, and it works because it has to have a buffoon that's a populist. You need a buffoon as distraction, and that's what Trump is. That's why he could have 34 counts, felony counts, and the more felony counts he gets, the more money he gets for his campaign.
Money, more votes. So let me ask Ajamu, welcome back. That was the quickest meeting. I'm glad. We need meetings like y'all's. You know what I'm saying? Our meetings be last for days and shit. Ajamu, like, look, I got something to do. This is what we gonna do and I'm out. I like how you did that, brother. I'm gonna have to learn. I wanna, because we're talking about fascism, and one of the things that I love about us having the opportunity to be on YouTube, because we don't get it twisted. We're not entertainers. We're not here to garner likes and all that type of stuff. We're talking about movement. We're talking about moving towards victory. Talking about revolution. I want to ask, for folks who we're going to do a little fascism 101, right? What are some examples of how fascism is played out today for the viewers, for the listeners, for folks who are like my 16-year-old grandson that might tune in? You know what I mean? What are some ways to make it clear that the fascism is turning out in real time in this particular moment? And I want to start with you, Ajamu.
Mm-hmm. But that's important because we're not able to communicate to folks, then we can't really build the movement. So I say, for example, that one way we get at this is to suggest that what we're talking about in terms of fascism at this particular moment, that people can, I think, understand, is that fascism is the terroristic coordination of the state resulting from the I know it sounds, we'll break this down, resulting from the convergence of finance and corporate capital with the state. Examples of that. This move that we're seeing for the last 6 years, just about more, to police what is acceptable information analysis in the public domain. And they're able to do that because they have moved millions of people into these privately owned spaces. These big tech, these media companies and big tech, that basically we get our information, we communicate with each other through TikTok and Twitter and Facebook, and now they are able to, with their control of these channels of communication, using Russian Gate or whatever excuse they come up with, to condition the people into accepting that there is some superior force out there that should be determining what kind of information is in fact acceptable. Now, who is driving that process? I argue that process is being driven primarily by neoliberal Democrats. They use this Russian Gate process to condition the folks to accept this. And now censorship has become normalized. And again, they're able to execute this because of this coordination this alliance between corporate power and finance power and the control of the state. So when we talk about people say, well, this is the private sector, and that is not really fascist because it's not the state. Well, I argue that those media companies, the big tech companies, they are part, in fact, of the state. They are what a theorist talked about or called the ideological apparatus of the state. Their role is to shape consciousness, to manipulate ideals, okay, to instill certain kinds of values and world perspectives. And so the driving force of this top-down fascistic imposition is coming not from a mass movement like a Trump movement, but it's coming from the control of the state by these powerful capitalist forces. So these are the kind of things we need to talk about. This is not falling out of the sky. This is a process that's visible. We are watching it every day unfold before our eyes. And that's an example that I would point to.
Right on,
Well,
right on.
I think that that's an excellent example because the basis for that, the driving force behind that is war, is U.S. a global hegemony and war. And so that's why all of these corporations, and they tell you it's a private industry, it's a private corporation. That's not true. Any of their research and development that has a military or geopolitical application, the U.S. government would appropriate it, would develop it, would send money to that institution and maintain that institution. That's one of the reasons why the HBCU campuses have been quiet. You haven't heard of no HBCU campuses going all in on the genocide and U.S. complicity with the genocide in Palestine. Why is that? Because in some cases, the U.S. war machine, the U.S. technological industry is looking to invest in those departments in the HBCU, give them money to develop the next generation of black technicians and competitors. You see, and so yeah, war is the basis for those companies that claim that they're not run by the state. And I think we need to point out too that although Ajamu identifies the neoliberal, so-called neoliberals, it's the neoconservatives on the other hand. It's the neoconservatives on the other hand that have always been almost we've always had a symbiotic relationship to the state, especially to the deep state. It's the right has always been able to influence the ideology and the priorities of the jingoistic state, of the nation state. And if you notice how there's over 59, I believe, 59 cop cities just being planned or in process or being used today in the United States. This is to train a militarized police force that already gets $7 billion a year of military equipment allocated to it. This militarized police force is an essential instrument of the fascist state. People need to understand that every fascist state historically has had a militarized national police force. But in the United States, there is no national police force. So how do they achieve that?
Yeah. Well, you said something really, I mean, everything you said is important, but you use a term that very few that we hardly hear anymore. You use the term neoconservatives. How many people are still using that term? And not saying they have disappeared because they haven't. But people don't even use that term anymore. But check it out. But they are. But check this out. Check this out. But what happened? One reason why people are not using the term neoconservative is because neoconservatives have collapsed into neoliberals. Neoconservatives are always neoliberals. And so that phenomenon that we all know about, called neoconservatism, it has basically collapsed into the neoliberal movement, And the consolidation of that, in my opinion, really occurred under Barack Obama. The
And
process he
Clinton.
became it started with Clinton. Of course, yeah, it was being really consolidated
Yeah,
with Clinton.
that's right.
And then it really took another form under Obama. He became the real ideological bridge between the neoconservatives and the so-called liberal interventionists. Okay, and they have disappeared. Well, they're still there, but they are neoliberals. I mean, this woman, this freak that was in the Biden administration, Victoria Nuland, her and her husband, who were some of the founders of the neoliberal movement. And remember, they all operated not in the Democrat Party, but where? In the Republican Party. But now they operating in
Yeah.
the Democratic Party because they made that transition. It started
But
under Obama.
that's because the, but that's because the consolidation of the right has become was mainstream. See, that's what people don't
Yes.
understand about the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party, the reason why it was a historical movement that can't be repeated, because history doesn't repeat itself, it just rhymes, is because the Black Panther Party delayed the consolidation of this hegemonic neoconservative consolidation. It held that shit up until the height of the war on drugs and the crack epidemic. That's when they were able to really punch it through. You see, with the
But it was a Black
militarized
Panther
police.
Party. But it was a Black Panther Party and the left movement in the U.S. that really spurred on the ruling class to say, hey, either we're gonna have to fight or we're gonna lose it. That was the essence of that famous or infamous Lewis Powell memo in 1971 when he wrote on behalf or wrote to the in essence the capitalist class and said basically either y'all going to fight or you're going to lose it. And that became the framework, the motivation for the consolidation. You're right, the consolidation of the capitalist fight back that we start really seeing in a different form in the 1970s because the fight back in the 1970s had both a military component and an ideological one.
Absolutely. And people really don't understand that pushback in the 70s that it also brought on that crack epidemic and a bunch of crack babies, a whole generation of crack babies. But the thing that really pushed that was able to really push that, it was a pushback against the games and the symbolism of the civil rights movement. Okay, the pushback against those gains of the civil rights movement, the so-called opening up of so-called business and corporate spaces, black, the fruits of the war on poverty and all of this shit. These crackers that in the South that became Dixie cracks, they were the consolidation of that became Dixie cracks. LBJ was one of them. You see, they pushed back with mass incarceration. They pushed back with the war on crime, and that was all echoed by the
And
Black Congressional
intensified
Caucus,
busing
by all
and intensified busing.
yeah. Yeah,
So real
the
quick.
prison, the school to prison pipeline, the school to prison pipeline. The weaponization of black flesh. The census, that how many census takings have we had since the Omnibus Crime and Control Act has filled the prisons with millions of black souls and black flesh? And when you go to these communities and you go to count the number of black people in the household, they don't count the 3 in the household that's upstate in prison. They don't count them.
So real
when
quick.
you go up to the prison, they count it in the county where they located that. So in white folks county in rural America, they counted up there. So my point is that the relationship between prisons and the pushback about a war on crime and the war on drugs was against the gains of the Black Power movement and the civil rights movements earlier in the decade.
So real quick, a couple things you mentioned, and welcome back, Professor Small. We appreciate you tapping back in. You was
Yes.
out right out in the streets. Yeah, we definitely gonna bring you on. One of the things that you all talked about, you touched on Cop City. You touched on the militarization of police on a national and international level. I'm thinking about Georgia, where we are now. Thinking about Cop City, thinking about Gilly, the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, thinking about the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation, which was known as School of the Americas. And it all sounds like slavery to me. I want to bring in Professor Small because we haven't heard from him just yet. But first of all, welcome to the platform. But I also want to ask you, um, how important to you is a united front against fascism, and what role do you see African people playing? Because I know that, and I hate to use the word playing, I'm using that loosely, but what role should Africans and indigenous people, in building a united front against fascism, and how we looking from your vantage point? I know the last time I had you on, I think was with Dhoruba, and we talked about what was going on with the French, and we talked about NATO, etc. And as ain't a damn thing changed, as they would say. So, wanted to know what's your thoughts right now. How important is it to build a united front against fascism, and what role should Africans have in that building, in that process?
Really, I think we should be a key part of the vanguard, given the historical relationship to fascism and African people's right to self-defense and self-determination to survive in this world. And Dhoruba mentioned earlier that we are at war, and the length of time that this war has gone on in all of its different forms against African people. So I think we ought to be strategic, because we still have to decide and make sure that we help to design what does the world look like after fascism? What does the world look like in the crushing of imperialism? And that design has to be a part of how we take on the institutions of fascism. I mean, they've gotten so subtle. We look at something as simple as what they call social media, and we think it's something there for us to have fun. And we don't understand it's an instrument for our control. I'm doing a tour, Dhoruba. I'll be back in Ghana next month, right? And the people were filling out the forms for a Ghana visa. And it's clear. So I went online and fill out a form to see why they were having so much problems. And it was clear for me to see it was designed by the US State Department. And it is designed to monitor our movement from here into the continent. So it is clearly a census taking instrument that is being used. We can't hear you, Dhoruba.
You might be on the phone or something. So that's Dhoruba. So.
No,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. You absolutely. I said keep going, because the regularization of international travel, especially between the West and Africa and other areas, is going to be contested in the
Yeah.
next upheaval of as I mean, we haven't even touched on the war in Sudan.
Right.
And we haven't even touched on
Congo.
the heat, the Congo, and the heat that NATO is feeling in the Sahel. We
Yes.
haven't touched on the fact that the ANC got 40% of the vote, and that's to form a popular government. And them knuckleheads are thinking about forming a popular government with the former settlers,
Yes.
and rather than form one with the EFF. You see what I'm saying? So
Oh,
we have to look
absolutely.
at why. We have to look at who's financing that war in the Sudan,
Right.
and it's the UAE and the Saudis, and who's backing them, or whose arms are they getting? They're getting them from the US.
We're watching the same thing unfold in Haiti. The same forces are backing
and
what's going on in
and
Haiti.
Kenya's
We're talking about that
and
NATO
Kenya's
group.
ally,
Yeah,
mhm,
they
and
call themselves the
Kenya's
core group, and the core group is made up of
president,
America, Britain, Canada,
and
Brazil,
yeah,
Israel, and France. And we don't think in terms of the natural resources in Haiti that they're trying to control. Haiti has gold. Haiti has bauxite. Haiti has uridium. Haiti has the second largest oil reserve in the Americas off of its coast it can't even drill for. And then we got the straits for shipping going between Guantanamo and Haiti that America intends to control Haiti, to control the strait to protect international shipping as far as they see it for their corporate structures of the world. I mean, if you just take a simple look at it, that's just a simple look at what's going on in Haiti. It's much more complex than that. It's the second largest, if not the first largest, drug corridor into the United States, and it's being operated by CIA and DEA. And so there's so much stuff that the imperialist is using as tools, you know, that we have to pay attention to. Even like me, I don't have a credit. I've never respected the credit thing they got in America. I'll give a damn what my credit is. I'll make my way, find my way. But this whole concept of credit scoring in America was another way of controlling a population for the corporate structure and the banking structure. We think it's doing something for us so we can be able to buy something and get a loan. No, that's secondary. This is how do we control and force you to pay your bills to the corporate structure. It's a bill collecting agency, this whole concept of credit rating that is controlled by the same corporate structures that's overpricing the goods that you're forced to buy because there's no greater competition. So all of that is tied into the same structure. It goes back primarily to the same ruling family. Most of the people that control the corporate structures of the world were the same ruling families in place doing the transatlantic genocide we call slave trade. The same ruling families. They've expanded, but at the core, they're the same people. And so we have to be very clear. That's why I use the term history erases the mystery. Let us see the linkages. Let us understand the linkages. I was just so impressed, Dhoruba. I mean, I know you were always a hell of a, you know, a revolutionary, a teacher, an activist, but the way you use language to teach fundamental political truth. See, if you can have information, but if your language is wrong, the people don't hear your information. So it's the way you present the information in language. And I thought you did a superb job. That's what I was trying to say earlier. It was like this on easy to grasp. I understand it. I can get it. And then when the people get it, then you've made a strong political statement in your teaching. So that point I wanted to make about the show as well. And then we come back to how we're controlled here in America and where the Black folks in America and other places fit in the united front. Because it has to be now a world united front. Can't just be in the US. Even though the US must have its own formulation, they have to be an African formulation. Africa is one of the most disorganized places in the world. We really don't see the effects of colonialism and slavery until you go there for a while. Dhoruba, you've lived there for decades and you've traveled the entire continent. So you can see how deeply broken things are from imperialism and its colonial structure of rule. And even though many of the white faces are gone, the colonial structure is now being controlled by Black faces. As we, you know, I used to be an advocate, get Blacks on the police force and things have changed. Then we got Black on the police force and nothing has changed. And so
I mean, what?
You know,
one thing,
you know, when they killed that young brother down there in front of the whole world, and nothing happened. And so there must be an instrument at some point in history that can address that level of justice that must be imposed on behalf of the people. That's another level of understanding how to struggle and where we got to go. Dessalines made it very clear, freedom or death. And we have to never drop that verse, never drop that line. In terms of
we know that, Professor Small, not to cut you, I know that we know that you have been a historian, you've been serious about our culture, you've been serious about African Revolution for decades. I was about to say centuries. We ain't that old, but close enough, right? So I want Dhoruba started something. What I wanted to ask you.
I'm getting but me and Dhoruba was close. We were the same age when he went to jail. So
I already know. Right? He's still the same age though, huh?
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask real quick though, Professor Small, is the importance of culture when you talk about building a united front. Because I know that because I think that one of the things that that I'm kind of driving towards is I know in past episodes, you know, folks are quick to, you know, when it comes to what it is that's going on, when it comes to the united front, before we can go anywhere, there's a question of Marx, there's a question of Lenin, there's a question of, you know, so many others. And it's almost, it becomes sidetracking at some point, because it's like, you know, we're clear about the theories, the philosophies, the you know, the politics and all of that. But what I think that we're uncertain about in many cases is the question of culture. And I know that to some people, they might find or may feel that that's not at all important. But I want to know what's your thoughts on that, because, you know, I, for one, feel it's very important. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think culture should be the highest expression of your ideology. See, well, the mistake we made in the 60s, I don't think I made it, but I probably did too. We thought the tools of culture was culture. We thought wearing the cloth was culture. Dancing was culture. Playing an instrument was culture. Being able to sing was culture. Those are tools of culture. Those tools were supposed to carry a concept, idea, and principle that made up your economic, politics, and cultural ideology. So how do you express it? So the white man got us using the tools without us being able to dig deep and find out what ideas are the tools trying to express. What idea is in that dance? What are the words in the music should tell of people fighting for freedom? Should it tell you to F yourself, F your mother? Or should it tell you to pick up the gun and move against those who have killed your father? How do you use that instrument? You understand? So culture is the idea, the foundational ideas that a people want to live by. That is called ideology. We have not worked hard enough to develop the ideology around the communal, the collective, cooperative history of African peoples through the century, and bring it into modern terminologies and modern phraseologies, and use the tools of our culture to spread it and project it. I hope that makes sense too.
Right on, right on. No, I definitely appreciate you adding on. Dhoruba, you had something to say? You
Yeah, I just you know, that's what we used to say in the party. Professor Small knows that the only culture worth keeping is a revolutionary culture. You know, and one of the things about our sojourn into across the Middle Passage and into this hemisphere and into this is that we have become we had to be a very innovative people. We had to be a people that could innovate and create and take almost from nothing and make it something. And that was how we survived the bullwhip days when everything was taken from us. But I want to point out that Professor Smalls made a complete analysis and connection between between what was affecting Black people here. And I just wanted to say that in a united front, Professor Smalls was pointing out it's not just here. It's just because it has to transcend here. Well, we know that the origins and the auspices of Pan-African ideology and thought and spirit came from the African diaspora, and we need to ride that. We need to understand that historically, and we therefore needs to understand our role. And that's one of the reasons that I want to kick it back to Ajamu with that, because they've been organizing to get Africa out of here. And when Professor Smalls was talking about Haiti and talking about the U.S., why the U.S. had exploited and valued Haiti, Look who in Africa that they're bringing that's become a very close ally of the United States. It's Kenya. The U.S. doesn't want to put boots on the ground, so it gets a Kenya now. Kenya, when you look at the region that Kenya's in and the role that Kenya had played in various border struggles across their border, with Somalia, with Central African Republic, with all just it's deep. So now it's the major U.S. ally, and I know Ajamu might have something to say about that because BAP, has really been organizing in Africa and trying to get ahead of this curve. These youth that are rising up and running the French and the Americans out of Africa. ECOWAS is in deep stress and everything. Right here in Ghana, for instance, the U.S. has a military contract with Ghana, and they're building a drone base up near Tamale in the northern region, and so makes my stay here seem very precarious because I can't really relate to being in a spot that got a U.S. drone base in it. I might as well move to a penthouse overlooking the police station.
Langley, Virginia, at some point.
I'm trying to tell you now. And,
we're gonna let Ajamu has to break out while Dhoruba look for his penthouse. So Ajamu, if you wanted to, I know you got a role. Give us your thoughts on where do you see yourself and others in this particular paradigm?
Well, as Brother Dhoruba pointed out,
looks frozen for a second. Okay, cool. You're back.
Okay, yeah, as been pointed out, the Black Alliance of Peace, an alliance that understands that peace is not the absence of conflict, but it in fact is a form of struggle against those forces that are responsible for the chaos and the death and the destruction that we are experiencing throughout the globe, and that we understand that if we want peace, we've got to fight for it, and we got to defeat those forces, and we name those forces, and we talk about the fact that we've got to defeat this white supremacist colonial capitalist patriarchy, led and a patriarchy that and a process and system that is being led by the U.S. And with their allies in the West. So we make those connections. We talk about the fact that what we are seeing is a weird kind of form of neoliberal Pan-Africanism with this latest episode of using African troops against other African people. That is the Kenyans against being used as instruments in Haiti. And if that process was so carefully constructed, using the racist tropes of Africans who can't govern themselves, wild chaos that needed to be controlled. And who's going to control it? Well, white folks using African people. And we're supposed to believe that the same white folks that can rationalize supporting a genocide in Gaza are supposed to care about African people in Haiti. So these connections we are making the connections between the militarization of police forces in the U.S. and the militarization that's taking place on the African continent by the same colonial capitalist state. So these connections have to be made because when we talk about the African nation and talk about the worldwide revolution, people need to understand what we're talking about. That we're talking about the emergence of a revolutionary African nation where the foundation is on the continent, but it is also included in the concept or the idea that all of us are African people. We reside in these various spaces throughout the Americas and throughout the world. And that in these spaces, in particular in the Caribbean, in these spaces where we are still involved in a struggle for national liberation in the U.S., in Colombia, and other places, we're all part of the African nation. So these kinds of connections we have to make, especially at this moment, when it's quite clear that the Western powers have decided that either they're going to run things or they're going to blow the world up. So these are the elements we have to raise. We have to have people to understand that fascism is their response to crisis, their instrument that they are attempting to use in order to maintain global hegemony, and that we are entering a phase of consolidated fascism in the U.S. And we've got to get ourselves prepared for it, because it's almost an inevitable phase, unfortunately. And if we're going to survive, and I think we will, we've got to understand what we're up against and prepare our forces to, in fact, struggle.
Well, to bringing you back on, Ajamu, it's been a couple weeks. You know what I mean? Haven't had you on, but we definitely like I said, we can appreciate your analysis. We have a number of different things coming up, and we'll be inviting you to further discussion around building a united front against fascism, because we believe that it's absolutely necessary at this stage that we put aside our petty differences and
Exactly.
and handle this business, because right now the state got something for us all if we don't hop on the right
Exactly.
side. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And again, we salute our leader, our brother, for making this call and sparking this conversation. So thanks a lot again. It's an honor to be with Brother Dhoruba. It's an honor to be with Brother Professor Smalls, as someone I've admired from afar for quite some time. Appreciate all you Africans.
Thank you,
Okay, brother. Be safe.
It's good to see you and hear you and your extraordinary
Stay strong,
teaching.
man. But listen, he's going on telling about what's in there. I think that I'm going to have to bounce myself in a few, but I just wanted to Professor Smalls, he just passed over, how wanting the comprador class in Africa is. And I think that one of the things that we should raise here is how the U.S. is trying to use the Jeffries and the Meeks and those black comprador class politicians to assuage so-called U.S. Involvement in Africa now, because the U.S. is panicking because of the Chinese and the Russians and the coups and in the Sahel and bordering in ECOWAS. So I want you to try to let folks know, man. It's kind of hard from here, for Black folks who are coming, because whenever a Black person makes the trip to Africa for the first time, it's much more than just jumping on a plane and flying here. It's a spiritual, it's an emotional, it may be a deeply subjective and meaningful a trip in their life, but like Imam Jamil Al-Amin taught me, he said all that's not real is camouflage, and so people come here and they don't understand, how messed up things are and how deep the U.S. is here, because when you see the police and the equipment they have and the way they're rolling, you could see where they're getting their information and their training and equipment from. You see, and so it's here. The U.S. hegemony is designed to to make all of the so-called former colonial police forces and militaries compliant with his hegemonic territorial control in any region at any time. And so this is why we have to really understand what it means to be a Pan-African, what it means to be a Pan-African revolutionary in this particular historical moment, and how that plays into the call for a united front, because it calls for solidarity today with movements in the Congo, with movements in West Africa, with movements in Haiti, and indeed in Kenya itself. And this solidarity tomorrow is going to be criminalized and called supporting terrorist movements, terrorist activity by the State Department. So our relationships on this apparatus, these networks and the internet, the weaponization of data and algorithms is such that that we have to begin to figure how we could maintain a more face-to-face, direct relationship to each other, and cling closer to the masses of people where they at. You see, and I think that's very important. And I think that I know personally that I'm questioning the efficacy of or how relevant the idea, the concept of the nation state as an expression of self-determination is. I'm starting to question the very notion of nationalism in this age of global communications and the global village, you see, where the medium becomes the message, and as Professor Smalls pointed out, we are programmed in a way that's aggressive and self-delusional in terms of our own culture and what's of value. Lombe Brass said that many of us in the diaspora, especially in the U.S., suffer from what he called a syndrome. I said, man, what syndrome are you talking about? He says it's a residual absentee slave mentality. That we were in that. I said, oh yeah? He said, yeah. And he said, in Africa, you'll see that they're suffering from a similar syndrome, but it's different because they weren't taken from the land. Land was expropriated underneath their feet by the colonials. And I said, so what's their syndrome? And he said it's a residual absentee colonial mentality. And so I just wanted to leave that there with Professor Smalls, because I mean, you could see anybody that travels through the continent and see that the young people now are beginning to assert themselves, and they're tired of the old political elite and ethnic centric political elite and property owners robbing and using the state as a means of livelihood and power. So young people are starting to see things, but like the United Front, Kalanji, just building it requires political education. It's something that has to occur in the fight, in the struggle, you see, and culture informs it. We could see how they co-opted, all of the music that the folks are dancing to in Africa, aside from Afrobeat, if it comes out the United States, it's probably our music. And when I say to them, Professor Smalls say to them, this ain't no American. These are African. This is African music. You see,
Yeah.
and because we have to educate folks here to what the nature of the empire is, of what America is. And it starts with the British because their experiences is with those people, you see. And so I always go all in on the British and how they have this residual absentee colonial mentality. They really, really do. Because you could see that the level of poverty, the level of disparity between the wealthy and the poor, between the use of resources, the distribution of food, you would think that the people would organize themselves, that they would resist. But why don't they? It's not just a question of police presence in certain places, and just when you go, it's almost self-inflicted. It's almost like accepting that these people in power, you know, they're going to be there, and there's really nothing that you can do about it. You see, and so they don't have our spirit of resistance. They don't have our spirit of going at what we really want or desire, our freedom dreams. I can see it every day here. Every day I'm surrounded by it. People just don't see. And you know, and Professor Smalls will tell you that that when we come to Africa, we look at the savannah and we look at the land, we see potential. The Africans don't, for the most, they don't see it like that. They see it maybe as either a survival mechanism or a waste. It's not doing anything, you see. But we see it as potential because we say, look at this space. You see.
We got a few more minutes. I want to ask Professor Small before we drop off. I know that we know that you go back to being a student of Malcolm. Some of us remember you from First World Alliance, Slave Theater, all that good stuff back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And, you know, with folks like Dr. Jeffries and so many others that have, you know, put in work historically. With all this information and all your travels, if I was to pose one question, and I would say this for some of these young organizers that are coming up, some of these youthful advocates that are propping up and positioning themselves now, because I think these are the main folks who we're talking about building the united front for. Because I think that one of the things that we get twisted is oftentimes we get our egos point us in the direction of our peers and folks our age and better. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, I know folks from my era, my generations, that ain't gonna bust a Concord grape in a fruit fight. And I'm sure that you all can say the same, right? So for those young organizers, these organizers who, because they say elders for counsel, youth for war, where do we go from here? What is your advice for these young freedom fighters who are in the making that we can't possibly ignore, because if we ignore them, we don't have a future, because those are the folks who are going to fight. What do we say to them? Because right now, it's a lot going on, as you say, but at the same time, social media got people absolutely stupid. Right now, an OG or an elder can be any Negro on YouTube or on Facebook with some color in their beard. You know what I'm saying? Or with a nice social media page. You know what I'm saying? It's not a situation where you are actually sitting at the feet of the elders. That's something that's becoming forward. Yeah. I know you know. So I want to ask, like,
go ahead. Well, the key thing is
go ahead.
We must have a historical understanding of slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and fascism. We got to understand How did those institutions work? How were they arrived at? How did they use them against us? What is the face of imperialism, fascism, colonization, and slavery now? What does the face look like now? Is it Chase Bank? Is it what when we say the Black Caucus, what is that the face of? Behind that name, what are they doing that is inflicting the enslavement continually upon African peoples in the United States and the African world? We've got to have a historical understanding of what occurred here. And we've got to have a historical understanding of the instruments used against us. And I think Dhoruba was talking about earlier, the instruments have changed somewhat, but the intent of the instruments are the same. The exploitation of the masses for land, labor, and resources. So how do we understand that in a way that we can understand that at the core of our struggle, at the very core of our struggle, have to be identity. Not identity in just skin color. That's not identity. When I say identity, I'm talking about what much of the world call ideology. I don't separate ideology, identity, and culture. And I don't confuse culture, as I said earlier, with the tools of culture. Culture is a set of concepts, ideas, and principles that allow a people to govern themselves and recreate themselves. It allows the people to protect itself from genocide. And so we have to be clear, how do we arrive at what that's going to look like? And what does that look like for us now? And so that's what I try to talk to the young people about. I may come at it using traditional African religion. It says, a Yoruba, an Akan, a Buddhist, a Congolese, when I get at the core, they're all talking about the same thing. We get to look at the trappings, the symbolisms. No, all those symbols is trying to explain food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security is absolutely necessary for survival. And to arrive at that, you must control economic, politics, and culture where you are. And to maintain that, you have to know how to defend against somebody else controlling your land, labor, and resources. Now, how do we bring those elements together and explain it in a way that people can say, I get it, they're connected. And our future depends on our understanding how to best explain and utilize it. Yes, I'm your student, Dhoruba. I'll be listening when you don't think I'm listening. But I'll be listening because you are the sharpest cat.
I think you really, I think you broke. I think he got to the point there, don't you, Kalandri? We, I'm working. I know I'm working with Kalandri and others, to put together a structure that really has a leadership council. The leadership council is not the people that's in the front of the face of the united front is its constituent organizations. That's the face of the united front, and the mass line that they all have. If we have a mass line on at least the fundamentals and the basic of reasserting ourselves, let's say in public education, in the field of public education, that means we have a mass line where the front and all its constituents issue the same newsletter, the same press conference, call together their same network to support this. One doesn't, a united front is about the maximization of those of us who are on the same side of the barricade and have the same enemy and have the same tactical and strategic objectives. And so it's not about uniformity, it's about unity. It's about principle. And so I'm trying to put together somewhat of a democratic centralist structure that will allow every organization to have use the same central database that the front creates. We could exchange information and especially on political figures and public figures who influence public opinion. So we that's one of the first things that we have to avail ourselves with. We have to have a professional um, 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 United Front database, and every organization can contribute, and because every organization in the alliance is involved in struggle in some way or the other. At least we're assuming that, and therefore they have an input into what the mass line of the United Front should be, especially maybe in their region, in their area, or in their neighborhood. Excuse me one second.
Anyway,
Yes,
yeah.
sir. And he's very on with that. That is absolutely necessary. That type of uniformity must exist. There was back in the '60s. I forgot what we called it. There was one was I think in Chicago, one was in New Jersey, and it was a data storage organization. What did we call it? But you could reach to find out what was happening in any particular Black population in America, in any particular city. I know it got disillusioned by the late '80s, but it was there for use in the '60s and '70s. And we need to create such a database.
But I mean, I think every organization, I think every organization that's operating now is operating in the sphere of the current technology. So we know that we could have an effective communications center in this, and and it could be national. It just is a national effort. So we could have a communication nodules in major cities that monitor the news, that monitors the events in the community, that sends in a daily synopsis of significant events by government, police, or whatever, and it goes into the central database, and that means everybody in the alliance has access to that in real time in their own struggle. You see, and so when an emergency arises, which it of course will, when something that the enemy is going to focus on as maybe a point of connection or contact with the state, and they wanted to try to prove ideological, and I think that's very important, as Professor Small pointed out. They're going to try to make an ideological point here about the right of the state and their laws and how it's so we might have to, the front might have to really deal with this in real time in terms of demonstrations, in terms of figuring out what type of actions that have to be taken and stuff like that. So that's why we have to have a very a nimble advisory advisory board, advisory group that reports to the leadership council and that takes the ideas of every organization on the streets and the face-to-face relationship that they have with the people, and they say, well, this won't work in the projects over here because the people are besieged by this, that, and the other. You see, and that becomes um, um, maybe a tactical or a strategic issue that the leadership council has to resolve, and we have to incorporate and use the intellectual, the academic, and whatever agencies that we have available to in the front, you understand, to come up with a reasonable course of action in real time.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
then one day,
I'm saying then one day, and I'm gonna end with this, then one day if a front, and we can build this, and we can do this, and the fight that's ahead of us is gonna be terrible in what's coming out in 2024. And if you look at Project 2025 and how they plan to implement fascism in real, straight up in your face. So we're going to have to struggle, and if we could struggle through as a front and empower our people and protect our people at least on the local level, and defend them and defend our interests, I think that in 4 years' time of this front, to become a real political force, a political party, a real rainbow coalition. But as always, in the vanguard are African people. In the front of this are African people, because we got to learn not to get mad. We just got to get even.
Right on. Well, listen, we have to wrap. Definitely appreciate you brothers coming on. Got to get you on more often. Definitely, Professor Small, we got you on last minute. I called you early this morning, and you had already told me you had stuff to do. Like, look, we ain't got time to be playing no games. I'm just joking, but came through. We appreciate it, and looking forward to learning more from you and with you. And again, thank you for all that you've given us in regards to to this movement and to our culture as a whole. Definitely. I want to
try to learn from the struggle. Learn from the struggle.
I'm on radio.
Right on. So we are actually I want to point out we have a couple new books that'll be dropping. One is Beyond Cop City. This is Beyond Cop City's Dismantling State and Corporate Funded Armies and Prisons. This is a piece that is edited by our good sister, Dr. Joy James. I have a few pieces that I've contributed as well to this particular piece. This will drop during Black August. This will be taking place during August, so make sure you look for that. And then we have, and this is all coming from Black Power Media. We appreciate you all that's been supporting us. We have another piece that'll be coming out with our good brother who's on the screen right now. This is a piece that'll be dropping in Philly in February. It's called Revolution in These Times, Black Panther Party veteran Dhoruba Bin Wahad on anti-fascism, Black liberation, and the culture of resistance. This piece right here was a number of interviews that we've done on this platform. And this particular book right here, the forward is also by Dr. Joy James. So that'll drop in February of 2025. So look out for that. For folks who are new to the platform, make sure you subscribe. Scrolling at the bottom of the page, you will see how you can subscribe to this channel. We're close to 50,000 subscribers. I think we're about 800 away. So make sure you make your mark and make your presence felt. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, it's scrolling right across the bottom. We have a whole lot coming up, a few different events and functions nationally. If you have anything that you want us to report on or talk about, make sure you send it to our email, which is mediablackpower@gmail.com, mediablackpower@gmail.com. Also, again, you can see at the bottom what's scrolling. We can include it on our social media if you got something that's relevant, and it's for African people home and abroad. Brothers, I appreciate y'all again for coming on board.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to win in spite of ourselves. And let's keep on keeping on.
Peace and blessings.
Thanks for having me, Kalanji. Power to the people. Yeah, Professor. Oh, man, he's gone now. I have to go and holler at him. Okay, man.
It's all good.
I'll holler. It's all good, bro. I'll let you later, man. Peace out.
No doubt, brother. Be safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
What? Walk with that bullshit, that public masturbation disguised as a plan to save us mind-fuck niggas who don't give a fuck about a person, place, or thing. How the fuck you figure all that red, black, and green? Peace queen, peace king, free Mumia, massa please, emasculating, self-absorbed dreamers, pro-black extremists, cow dung flung so eloquently is gonna save this people. So nymphotically fucked by the back of the bus that black power nut now stains your cerebrum. Revolution is war. war, not romance. And war is an art, not a slow dance, but a skill which requires techniques, blueprints, and plans. Not some bullshit debate as to whether I under or overstand. I mean, nigga, please. Revolution is war, that infectious sore which spreads for lack of cure till freedom is no more, just beyond that door. Yet revolution is more. Revolution is knowing when to deploy Oprah Winfrey as opposed to Asada Shakur. When to retire that kente cloth for a fitted cap and a throwback instead. When to send Jay-Z as opposed to Dead Prez, appearing to be weak yet uniformly omnipotent. This is not me talking, this is revolution I'm quoting. Revolution is asymmetrical, the war art of contradiction. Revolution is yes a massa while poisoning everything in the kitchen. Revolution is what's missing in your black power dimension of that nigga selling out because he make gangster rap songs about cracks and that confusion. But as long as 33% of the proceeds go to the Council of Independent Black Institutions, brother, keep doing what the fuck you doing. And this is revolution. And I am a revolutionary. And this is the Revolutionary Black Leadership Society. And we beseech you niggas to lead, follow, or get the fuck out of the way. Peace.
I see you got about 18 tracks up on here, which look like they're gonna cover a whole lot of ranges. No things doubt. Right here, you know no what doubt. I'm saying?
You know, it's like it's a compilation of songs that I did from about 98 till 2005.